Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Gloved. Little different look to it today. We're looking to progress, we're looking to move forward, we're looking to give you guys content, give you guys opinions and views from right across the scale. And today we're going to get some views from across the fence. We're going to get some coaching views. He's worked as a player, a successful player, injury cut that short, got into goalkeeper coaching, progressed right the way up through the ranks, right the way to the England senior team, worked in the Premier League, worked with some great goalkeepers, worked with myself, someone that I loved working with, and now is the assistant first team coach of Southampton. So he's literally done the lot, and he's not even 50 yet. So I'd like to welcome Dave Watson to Gloved.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to an evening of your time, Joe.
Yeah, nothing but my time, Dave. Yeah, we've spent so much time together. Go right the way back to the under-19s. I remember when Davey was at Northampton, also working with the national team. Like I say, right the way to the senior team. An amazing journey. Lots of laughs. I've had a few tears, ups, downs. But it's been a great journey. Formed a great friendship. Family, friends. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. And you guys are really going to see what it takes to be a coach, a player, and an all-round good person, Davey. So you and Jamie already know from my time together. Put you guys in contact, obviously trying to get the best out of me, which I really enjoyed and appreciated. So Jay, over to you.
No, just listen. I say this every time. I'm excited about each guest, but I'm more excited because of the context of Dave when we met, and we met because of Joe, and Joe wanted to put the triangle in place. And it was, I think for me at the time, it was fascinating that Joe wanted me to meet the club doctor. Remember that? He wanted me to meet the club doctor. He wanted me to meet Xavi. So I met Xavi, didn't I? Yep. And then, you two were, it was England #1. You were the England goalkeeping coach. And Joe was like, Jay, I want you to meet Dave as well. And for me, it was really important to hear your side of this as well.
It's certainly a different context.
So I'm excited, Dave. As you can tell, I'm excited.
No, I think it will be slightly different to the episodes I've seen in the past. So I think it should hopefully bring something to the viewers, and they'll hopefully take some inspiration from somewhere along the pathway.
I know this is going to be really fire, this one, but I'm repping from Manchester. So we know, Dave, you're a proud York. I see, look at that. He's a proud Yorkshireman. So absolutely. What's that? Yorkshire what?
Born and bred.
What's it say?
With nout taken out.
Oh, you're killing me already.
Memories, you see, memories.
Yeah, that's it. You do. I never forget the first time Joe, he was like, so he's from Yorkshire, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Good looking, he said. Good looking.
And then he left the good looking bit out. But I remember, and I was like, this guy's definitely from Yorkshire. There's no mistaking that.
I obviously would have said he sounds aggressive, but he's not. He's a big softie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Soft. I'd have used other words, but I'm being respectful to the people that are watching this.
Very important.
So I'm going to jump in straight away here, because I think I can tell from the energy of you two how important the relationship has been for you two over the years. And obviously you've had a huge impact on Joe in that period of time. But let's, in order to have an impact on Joe, you had to have an impact on yourself. So, tell us about we've not had somebody who's a goalkeeping coach on here. So were you a striker? Tell me about your journey, Dave, from
my initial journey would be like any young kid who's out playing football now in the street or with his mates. The aspiration is to get in a team and ultimately somewhere along the line live a dream to be a professional footballer. At the time I started playing football, I'd got no aspiration of a position. I played outfield, I played in goal, kind of did a bit of everything. Come from, a family that loved being outside and playing sport, but there's no professionalism in terms of any sport within the family that I'm from. Come from a loving family, but obviously a hard-working background in terms of the community and the village I'm from is a mining village, and all the surrounding villages. In truth,
which part of Yorkshire?
I lived in a village called Royston, which is in South Yorkshire, really on the border of West Yorkshire, and everything around where I'm from was a mining community. All my family had all worked in and around the mines, and that's the community and the environment I was brought up in. Very fortunate that we lived at the side of a park, and ultimately I spent my whole life in that park playing some kind of sport at various points throughout a calendar year. When it's sunny, maybe in the summer it's cricket. When it's bad weather, it's on the tennis courts and you're playing tennis or playing football on the tennis courts. But we're never in the house. It were all outside and sport based. And ultimately, it's different. It was a different time then. I went to junior school all the way through up until 11, and we probably had 3 matches in the school team or something like that. We didn't play a lot of competitive football or sport at that time in schools. And it wasn't really until I kind of started secondary school that it became more of something for me, and playing with my friends then, and wanting actually to kind of succeed. I played in the local team, which we called Royston Dynamos, and there were myself and another young goalkeeper who were both very, very similar levels and had similar attributes. The only difference between us was I was a slightly better outfield player. So when it was his weekend in goal, I played outfield. And unfortunately for him, he didn't get so much time on the outfield things when it was my turn in the goal. And we just alternated like that. And I didn't mind when it was my turn to play in goal. I loved it. But when I was playing outfield, I loved it and I wanted to play football. I had aspirations to try and improve myself all the time. And I think one of the biggest turning points in my young life was the fact that I played in the village team called Royston Dynamos, and we'd had a relatively successful first year. And I've told this story when I've done some speaking and after dinner things about the mentality that probably sets you on a path. And at the end of that first season, even though I was only young, I felt as though I'd really contributed to that team, both in goal or outfield, and I deserved some recognition for that. And at the end of the season, Player of the Year awards, I didn't get any recognition. And I told my dad I wanted to leave. I wanted to go and leave and be in a team where I wanted to be more successful. I wanted to be more valued. And I left my local team and went then to play for a team called Barnsley Park Avenue. And it was whilst I was playing for Barnsley Park Avenue that I'd kind of decided that playing in goal was probably my strongest suit. I'd been spotted once by a scout playing for the school team at that time when I'm at secondary school, actually playing in goal. And I went and then played for Barnsley Park Avenue and really kind of started to think about playing in goal full time. The first time I ever went for a trial to play for Barnsley itself, after that first year at Royston, I was deemed as not good enough when you have that first kind of trial type period. But nothing really put me off. I felt obviously as low as you would as a kid at that time when you have your first experience of rejection. But when I decided to go and leave and play for Barnsley Park Avenue, and actually I surrounded myself then with new friends and people who, in a strange way, looked up to me because I performed reasonably well straight away for that team. I felt comfortable playing in that team, and we became successful in the area as a team. And a few of them lads went on to, you know, achieve decent levels of football, even if not quite making it professionally. We had a good group of players, and some of them went on to be apprentices with me at Barnsley. That kind of set the trend in terms of me making big decisions, even at a young age, if you like, and certainly coming out of what was a very comfortable bubble for me to have stayed in the village team, and I could have stayed in the village team forever, if you like, you know.
So you've mentioned, it's interesting that you've mentioned a few words in there, like, you know, success and rejection and recognition. They seem like words that have sat with you and you've gone after them. Yeah. And you will have experienced at all levels of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel who were the people that shaped your life early back then?
Certainly the only influences on my young life and young sporting life, and it would have been the same really for most people in our area, were my family, my mum and dad, and my dad especially were a real driving force. Now being a parent myself, I understand the dedication that they need to support you in your aspirations. And at the times that I was growing and obviously moving teams to play for Barnsley Park Avenue, that meant that I wasn't playing within 5 miles of Barnsley. We were playing the other side of Sheffield, Rotherham, all you know, varying kind of distances on a Sunday. At that time, I'm starting to get recognition, and Barnsley are asking you to go for trials. At that time, because I'm still at school, you play for South Yorkshire schools. So that's a training session in the midweek. You might play up at Durham one weekend and down at Wiltshire another weekend. And I think without my dad doing what he did and, you know, supporting me and basically at that point, I'd never ventured on public transport. He took me everywhere. And I only realised now, or certainly when I was a bit older, that the sacrifices he made to make sure things happen for me. He never put me in harm's way, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's people's perception.
Have you got brothers and sisters?
I've got a younger brother who's 3 years younger than me. Yeah.
Okay.
But obviously he got the same support. He never kind of made it professionally or anything like that, but he's gone on to be very successful himself. But I think it's your parents that give you that first guidance and driving force. And until I got to 14, I'd had no influence in my football career other than playing football and trying to chase a level. I'd never been coached. I'd never had a coaching session. I'd not a proper coaching session, how we would view it today, both from a team point of view or from a goalkeeping coach's perspective. So the first time I went for a trial at Barnsley at 14, you would say now that I would have been as raw as you could ever get. And my first experience of that trial, I ended up straight away training with a reserve team. The most incredible thing, I'm in a corner playing with the lads, all of a sudden the reserves are training, there's a goalie missing, and I'm 14 and training with the reserves. And the one thing at the end of that session, they didn't want me to leave without signing some kind of paperwork to say that I would be associated with a club. And I mean, it's impossible for that to happen today in terms of, you know, player care. I mean, you can't put a young kid in that environment. But at that stage, I'm not saying that really that was the right thing. You either sink or swim, but you've still got to have something that makes you swim in that situation because obviously being thrown in at that point, you can fade away and die, if you like, you know. So a real strange introduction in terms of that. Frank Barlow, who went on to be a very successful coach, was the coach of that reserve team at Barnsley. And from that point, when I signed, my first experiences of then goalkeeper training were from a guy who I'm still in touch with, and he certainly was the one who made me have my initial start in football, and somebody who I obviously still keep in touch with and have the utmost respect for up to today, is a guy called Bob Widdowson. He played not many games for Sheffield United, but he coached all his life. He still gets out there on the grass and coaches now. His son was an apprentice a year or two after me, never made it. He lives in America now. Bob, at late 70s, will still go and spend 6-8 weeks in America and go and coach the goalies out there. He's just got a love and a passion for it that still transmitted to me, and the effort and time he spent with me at 14 years of age, basically doing it for pure love. No monetary gain other than to see me and hopefully others of my ilk just try and make something of my life and become a professional goalkeeper, was something that he took immense pride in. And I think my dad's upbringing of me, and then Bob's influence as my first goalkeeping coach, and then Eric Winstanley as my first proper coach as a youth team coach, who just instilled nothing but high standards and a winning mentality. That's what's kind of put the foundation on where I am today.
So what the wanting someone to learn for no other and get better for nothing else other than just literally the passion of football.
Yeah.
You've still got that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the grounding I'm from.
Yeah, but that's one of the hardest things to hold on to when it becomes a job, when it becomes a livelihood, when it becomes providing for your family. I've seen that in football. I've seen that in lots of people. So that's a great thing to have installed in you. And whenever I speak to goalkeepers, young or old, who want to ask me, or they want to ask me about their children going in goal, that's the first thing that I say. I say there's no point in doing it unless you want to be in goal, unless they don't want to be in goal. Sorry. So you can't tell someone magically how to be better.
No.
But you can certainly stop them in their tracks early doors. If they don't, you either want to be or you don't want to be a goalkeeper. And obviously you wanted to be a goalkeeper. And then when that was taken away from you, there was nothing else in your sights to do other than be a part of the goalkeeping world, right?
Yeah, I just loved it so much. I think that I had fights all the way along my career. I had some natural ability, that's for sure, because we touched on it earlier. I never got coached till I was 14. And when I talk about Bob and the influence he had on me, it was one night a week, and he'd warm me up for a match on a Saturday morning if it were a youth team match, or if we had a youth cup match, he'd obviously travel with the team. But
that was all quite normal back then. There weren't many,
for sure.
Like even my generation was, the very top end clubs, but the Shrewsburys or the Barnsleys are a lot bigger. But you're not getting too much. You're getting game time. You're getting game time.
Yeah.
You're getting game time.
And that's a big thing that I would say. We'll probably touch on this a little bit later when we talk about coaching and development and pathways. But there can't be anything better than playing games. And if you've got somebody who you can trust in, who can educate you through them games, the more games you play, the less mistakes you'll ultimately make, because you've got to make them early. And the earlier you make them, hopefully by the time you get more successful, all these mistakes are eradicated, and you want that level of consistency. And I think it obviously now, sometimes we talk about overplaying and things like that, but I think for a goalkeeper, it's a real massive part of your education being younger. And when I was an apprentice at Barnsley, I was fortunate enough that I was the only goalkeeper, if you like. So I had to be in the team, but they deemed me good enough. And it was just game after game after game. And we had a team that played, if you didn't play on a Saturday, you'd play for this team on a Sunday, and we were expected as the starting 11, if you like, to go and see and support the non-starters on a Sunday. And our job was 7 days a week. And I think, again, that somewhere instills something into you. I knew that it was a 7-day week. I knew when I woke up on a Monday morning to get that bus to Oakwell, if the first team had been at home, that I weren't seeing anything of a football that day. I'll be cleaning the ground for a day. If it took us 2 days, we'd be cleaning the ground for 2 days. That was part of my football education. The ground had got to be cleaned, especially if there were a reserve game on a Wednesday, and then you'd be cleaning it for an hour or two on a Thursday after a reserve game. These are the jobs you had. I mean, the wall at Barnsley, every time I see it, I kind of, in a strange way, get quite emotional, because I must have painted that front wall that's still there about 20 times in my lifespan at that club, you know. And
today, that's not the culture today.
No. But I'll tell you what, the group we had, we loved going to work. It was part of the job, looking after your players' kit, cleaning the boots. I remember taking players' boots home, drying them on my fire at home, and my mum getting me some paper, taking kit home that I'd ask her to wash because I knew I needed to have certain bits of kit for my players for the next day. And do you know what? It was the greatest 2 years of my life, and that is the tipping point for me, really, because I had the drive and ambition and the perseverance to really want to be a professional footballer when I left school, and I'd got the opportunity to be an apprentice. But in all honesty, I was a soft kid, been brought up nice. My mum and dad looked after me. I spoke earlier about my dad, you know, taking me here, there and everywhere and supporting me. I didn't get sent to these places and had to find my own way. He looked after me, and I was probably a little bit soft when I started on that apprenticeship scheme. But the first week, and knowing and working with the second year lads, they certainly made it clear that this was going to be a tough 2 years. And my outlook within that first week changed, and I became what I am now, because if I'd have stayed in terms of having the character and that softer personality, I would have just been washed away with it. I would have failed.
What's different today then? Let's jump into what's different today. We'll get into, just very quickly, say why you believe that's different in today's environment.
I think the young players today walk in expecting to get something straight away, and not necessarily having had to work or fight for anything. I find it's been a little bit too easy for them, and the culture can be a little bit too easy for them, and they see all the facilities and the standards, and ultimately what the first team players, and even obviously at Southampton now we've got a B team, but even the under 18s and all the things and the trappings that they have, and they expect to get the same pretty much straight away, if I'm honest.
Davey, let me flip that question, because what you've just said, this is no slur on you, but I'm bored of hearing that. I'm bored of everyone going. I've said it myself. I'm bored of hearing, oh yeah, you know, they just see the cars, they see what the first team is, they just see that. You know, in my, like, again, this is not me coming at you. This is me just trying to flip it. So what do you do then? That is the reality. That is the life. That is the life we live. That is Southampton. That is Tottenham. That is, you know, that's even in the Championship. That's maybe even in League One. They see it. They're accessing it. They see what the top players get. They see Ronaldo getting his third Bugatti. They see Aubameyang signing a new contract and getting 15 different chains around his neck. They see that. So it's being seen. So what do we do? What do we do? We don't moan about it. What do we do? That's the culture. That's what they see. But at the same time,
make them paint the wall, Dave.
You can't make them paint the wall, and you can't, and it's not their fault that they're seeing that. So what do we do? What do we do to get the mentality right? What do we do to get them looking away from the Instagram page and looking at the pitches and looking at the hard work that these guys have done to get to that point, what do we do?
I think you have to go back to the start of it and we have to try and have a real love for football. And why are you playing football?
Yeah.
Because you want to play football. Eventually, all the trappings that you've just described, if you achieve certain levels, will all come your way. But let's get back to being that kid with your mates, whether it's 7, 8, 12, 14, and your love for getting that ball out, whether it's on the street, on the tennis court, on the grass, on the park, whatever, and just get that feeling of your parents could never get you in. You'd be out there all day, every day, trying to do something better.
Right, I've got a question for you. So you're a coach.
Yeah.
You're a goalkeeper coach now, because I can only really relate to that. Top class goalie, you're like, this guy's got it. And he'll openly say, my aim in football, I don't particularly like the game, but my aim in football is to provide for my family, is to live a kind of rock starry kind of life. That's what I want, but I'm willing to do the hard work. Are you going to get your head around that? Because he's openly saying, my love for football is whatever. It's the best job for me. It's the best thing suited to me. How do you coach him? Because not everyone is like me and you. Not everyone bleeds football.
No.
Football is a business. And I see kind of pundits on TV, they hold it against some people of how they live their life and what they do off the field. But ultimately, it's about getting them through the doors and making them the best football players. It's not about making them fall in love. That is a bonus. That makes it easier.
If somebody tells me that part of their psyche is because they want to provide for the family, that actually gives me some hope and something to hang on to, because they're fortunate that they've got a talent. And we'll talk about me being the goalkeeping coach, and if a goalie describes that to me, I said, right, so everything that I put in front of you eventually will give you the best opportunity to perform on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, which ultimately will give you the best opportunity of providing for your family. And that will
you find a way. You find a way to relate. Is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're doing that. You're digging. You're looking for what is the driver in that individual.
Yeah.
Do you think it's difficult, Davey? Sorry, do you think it's difficult for coaches to let that emotional attachment to how they grew up in football? Do you think it's difficult for them to see through that, especially at the top? Because I feel like you have to be a top coach now. So I look at the likes of my current coach now. I don't think he really particularly cares what people's incentives are and what they want to get out of it. He wants them to be bang on it when they walk on the field for him and fighting for him, and I admire that about.
But I would say, obviously not knowing Jose Mourinho, but obviously would be in awe of what he's achieved, and however people view him now is that's another topic. But for me, I would want the same, whether I'm doing the first team players now or I'm coaching the goalies. The effort and commitment to be a winner, and what I want to put in to give you the best chance, I want you to come on that same page with me. And when we step onto that training pitch, it's all about trying to do something to make you better prepared, whether it's a physical session, whether it's a technical session, whether you go in the afternoon to do a gym session for some physical prep, or you're dealing with Jamie on a mental side. Everything that we do is 100% to give you the best opportunity to play on that Saturday. But whatever we do, I want that 100%.
And how do you handle 3 keepers, 4 keepers, different keepers that require different incentives, if you like, need different treatment? Because I've trained with you, and very intense, very to the point. You're so obvious in what you want, and I love that about you. You're so clear in what you want and the reasons behind it. How do you handle 3 different personalities that don't necessarily gel with that? I've worked with you, and because I see that in you, and I see that you're, there's a soft side to you, there's a hard working side, there's a soft side, and it's played with. But I've also seen, some people don't see through that, don't have the confidence, or don't see that in you. So how do you handle the fact that some people might be intimidated by your personality, some people might not?
No,
Do
I think
you know what I mean?
Yeah, the one thing I would say.
This is you as a coach, not as a person.
Yeah. When I first started coaching,
Yeah.
I certainly felt as though I'd missed out. Obviously, getting injured and having to retire. Basically, my last professional game's 23 years of age, and when I first started coaching, I found it really, really difficult. Whether I was dealing with somebody who was 16 or the first senior goalie I dealt with was a guy called Keith Welsh at Northampton Town.
Yep.
And he was, I think, 36, 37, Keith. And I'm 27, 28 when I first started coaching him. So, you know, at that time, I'm coming in and he's an really experienced pro, played a lot of league games, a lot of time at Bristol City before he came down the pecking order to Northampton. And I was a really aggressive coach. And I was aggressive because I couldn't cope with knowing that I didn't feel as though these guys were putting in 100% on the training pitch, and I'd had that taken away from me at 23.
I remember at under 19, Jay. First time I ever experienced going with England, thinking, "Whoa, this guy is a lunatic."
Yeah, but I was about to say, was that because, a bit like the COVID scenario now, people had it taken away, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, that might not happen again. And you're looking at it and saying, do not waste your time.
Yeah.
And you're not going to allow them to do that because you know what it's like for it to be taken away.
Yeah, and I think my starting point, because to be honest, when you first start, and that was really tough for me as a young coach dealing with a senior guy who'd done and achieved the equal amount of me and obviously played hundreds of games more. I found it really difficult because I had a guy at 37 and I had a young guy who actually had been an apprentice under me at my time at Barnsley in my first job. So I had a guy at 37 and I had a guy called Adam Solly who actually sat on the bench at Barnsley beneath me. So you got, I think Adam at that time was probably 19, Welsh is 37. So you got the total full spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I'd still got issues trying to fight to become a half decent coach, because if I relate to my first sessions, I'm sure if you put them on today, and I took Joe through one of them, it was terrible, but we have to take small steps and build at a time. But what I did is
all coaches, Dave.
Yeah, for sure. There's no way you hit the ground running in every aspect of life that you try, and hopefully you're developing as you go along. So I had a real spectrum in the two of them, and then you're dealing with the apprentices as well. But I just felt as though that every moment should be really precious to them. And when I didn't see that, because I'd had it taken away, that became a driver for me. But I know now, speaking obviously with yourself and working with psychologists, for a long period of time, certainly through the latter stages of my coaching career with the goalkeepers, that obviously wasn't the ideal scenario to go down. But the one thing that I do know is that I only got better as a coach when I actually became more of a human being to the actual guys I was working with. And I would never say on here that I'm was and is, and maybe if I go back to goalkeeping coaching, I am the greatest goalkeeping coach. But what I would say is that now I've got a philosophy. We could talk for hours about philosophies and what I do, but there is no way on this earth that I will get anything out of you unless you and I strike up at least a personal relationship and a trust that we can work together. And without that trust, I could be the best, I could be the worst. It is irrelevant. It will not happen.
See, if you're listening to this, guys, as a coach, if you're listening to this as a player, I mean, I've spoken to the pro license guys in golf. Any coach that I've worked with, the first base level, Joe heard me say it, if I can't look at you in the eyes, if you can't look at me in the eyes, then it doesn't matter what tool, technique, information does not matter. The base level is, does this person get me? Do I get them? Good things start from there.
No.
And so the key for everybody is it's the relationship first.
Yep.
It's the relationship. And even for the players, from the players' perspective, you've got to also put your bit in to that relationship. Don't you, Joe?
Certainly do. Yeah, you do. You need to see that.
Yeah.
You need to see that. And it's always a good starting block as a player working with the coach to see that the coach at the start is willing to make that, willing to build that relationship. And it's nice to see their goals early doors as a player. This is a message, to coaches. It's nice to see that they want, because not every coach you work with, especially even in the professional game, some of them are just doing their job. They're not particularly that invested in whether you get better, whether you do worse. It's an amazing feeling to have someone kind of, as a coach who's your senior, someone you look up to, reach out to you as a person, and then also make it clear that they're in this relationship to make you better, and to make you a better person and a better player on the pitch. And that sounds simple, but it is a great message to get across. And it's like Dave said, it's the most important message. Otherwise, you don't really stand a chance, because why would they listen to someone that they don't feel is trying to help them?
And why is Dave? I mean, now I know we're zigging and zagging here, but I think this is just the uniqueness of your position and your journey. Whereas for most, it's like it's either you're still a player or you're an outfield player. Whereas your journey is now you're a coach, but you've also shifted from the goalkeepers union to the other side. So the reason why I ask this is, why is that then very different for a goalkeeping coach stroke goalkeeper relationship than it is now for an outfield coach relationship, and now you're seeing it from the other side?
I think the one fundamental difference is the fact that when you're the goalkeeping coach, you could be working with 3, 4, 5 great goalkeepers, but there's still only one number one. And the relationship you have, your working week is still built around giving your number one the best opportunity for him to play well on whatever day of the week it is. Mm-hmm. And the work for the rest of that group, even though you could still have I still would have to have the same relationships and trust, but it works differently for them, because they have to know that certainly the back end of the week, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're prepping that number one for what he's going to face at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon. And it's going to be relevant work. You're going to get better for it. You'll be educated. Obviously, if you're sat on the bench, you'll be doing the work. You'll see it on the Saturday. You'll be ready if something goes wrong with the number one. But ultimately, you're following the pathway of the number one. And
are you communicating that? Because
for sure, you can't put generic sessions on always, but I think at the start of a week, if there's a specific weakness, whether it be in the number one, the number three, or one of the young lads training, you can make certain areas of that more specific for them. I would want to, when I was doing the job as goalkeeping coach, cover a set of bases every week anyway on different topics, but part of the topics would be the simple building blocks of a technical aspect within that, whether it were a crossing session, a speed session, a low diving set, whatever element of it is, whether you've got the younger ones or the mid ones, the fundamental building blocks of having those sessions still get you ready for the bigger picture at the end of the week. But ultimately, come the end of the week's work, it has to be specific for your number one. He's the one who's going to get judged on Saturday.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if we believe that he's going to be best prepared, that means the pathway to get him best prepared is still going to be a pathway that's relevant for you somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
But the work is evolved around that number one. And so your relationships in that smaller group are easier to cajole. And ultimately, it's still about the personal relationships. But you've got to be able to talk to the number two and number three. I think they're sometimes the hardest positions ever. But when I go now to the first team group, I'm fighting and starting a new job, if you like. I'm 18 months into it now. But you certainly don't have the close relationships like I had with the goalies, because you're never basically doing a one-on-one, or even it's only on a Sunday when you've got the lads who have not played. You might have a group of 6 or 8. That's the only similarity to working in that small number, like with the goalies. So you don't form those personal things. But again, you have to sit, you have to talk with them, and you have to show them. But you're trying to develop relationships with them all the time, but you never get that close-knit feel like you do even with a group of goalies. Even when I've worked with groups of goalkeepers when obviously the second, the third, the fourth, sometimes none of them are particularly happy. They all want to be number one. And it's probably been some of the hardest times in my coaching career, knowing and feeling that I'm having to upset guys who I've got a lot of respect for, in some cases love dearly, and would more than anything want them to be performing at the best and showing everybody what I know they're capable of and everything like that. But I have to and have had to make decisions that doesn't suit all that group. But it's never made on a personal level, and ultimately it's for the best for the team at that time and the club. But the group that you work with, when things are not tight, it affects everything around you, and it's very difficult to keep everybody happy.
And I'm privy to it, because I've worked with 4 of the goalkeepers: Joe, McCarthy, Fraser, and Harry Lewis.
Yep.
So the dynamics of you managing that, Dave, of managing an England number one, of managing 2 goalkeepers in the same team who are both quality goalkeepers, recruiting a young goalkeeper, Harry Lewis, from Shrewsbury to Southampton. Let me tell you about Harry Lewis. He's like, Jay, I'm really nervous about my first session with Watto. No, he didn't say nervous, by the way. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because you signed him, right?
Yeah. I remember having a phone call with him and hopefully selling myself and what the future could hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But so he is scared because you're England goalkeeping coach and you're about to be his club coach as well.
Yeah.
What's your message to the young goalkeepers?
At that time for Harry, I'm obviously not aware of how he's feeling at that time about the first session. I think naturally there would be an apprehension in whatever context. He's a signing for Southampton and he's coming into actually a quality environment where the standards, without being disrespectful to what and where he's come from, are going to be pretty high. I don't know who or what he'd heard in terms of what he were expecting from me. But as we started talking about here, without having that relationship with him at first, all I would have demanded is very high standards in every aspect of whatever that first session was, because I couldn't even tell you what happened.
Dave, you've got to imagine, how old was he at the time? 17?
I would say 17.
17. Okay. So for those of you watching and listening, 17, Shrewsbury. He's at his heroes club, Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
Joe's England #1. And his England goalkeeping coach has recruited him.
Yeah.
And he's got Fraser Forster at the club.
Yeah.
Now, I've worked with Harry since he was 16, 17. And I said to him, you have got access to somebody that most young goalkeepers in the country do not have access to. Right now, this guy's the England goalkeeping coach, and he's come and recruited you. So what we have to deal with is that feeling of you being, like apprehensive to looking at, he's actually come and recruited me. That's the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep. And we had to shift that, and he's grown, and I'm sure, but you did put the fear of God in him. But that's good. He's got high standards now.
Dave, what are high standards? What are these high standards? What does high standards mean for a player, for a footballer, for a person? What are high standards? What do you expect? Simple. Because we're talking, our audience is right the way down to trying to get in the school team to trying to play for England or whatever.
I think the high standards are what you set yourself. If we're talking about being, at a football club, but
to be clear, David, high standards doesn't mean you have to be good, does it?
No, not at all.
I'm just being clear because high standards are talked about. I want to know what they are. I want people to know what high standards are in football. My
first contact during the day as a coach is if I expect you in the gym at 9 o'clock or 9:30, that's where I expect you to be. And that'll be the start of your day. I'll have spoke with the sports scientists about what the session's going to be, and we'll do 20 minutes to 30 minutes pre-activation, and that whole pre-activation will be based around what I'm going to take you in to do. So I don't have to spend, in the middle of winter, 20, 30 minutes of what is mine and our time of developing and working on something wasted by having to do an extended warm-up. If we do this properly and we bang on time, then we can walk out onto the pitch at 10 o'clock, which gives us that extra half an hour that I want so that we're ready, we're primed. So at 9:30, you're starting your work. At 10 o'clock, I'm starting my work, and we're all there, ready on time, and action stations. So the first element is just that timekeeping and the pride that you're going to show in applying yourself at that time of day when half of the other team are not even in the building.
Maybe I think that's not even the first element. What about, so I'm a goalie, and the night before, my hamstring's just not right. I can train, but it's just not right. When do you as a coach need to know? When do you need that information?
If we've formed a relationship, I would expect you to text me as a minimum a message that night.
Because I think that's important. I think that's a really important message for any young player. To get the respect of your coach, you need to give respect to your coach.
Yeah,
so,
sure. And that's being honest about your situation, and actually that is the start of actually being professional, isn't it? Because it's not putting yourself in a position tomorrow where you've not said anything to your coach, whoever she may be, and he or she will have planned your session and expect you to give your all. And at the point you either break down or can't give your all, that coach is going to wonder why. Yeah. And because you've not had a conversation or an honest conversation either the night before or the morning of, you're judged then totally differently, where actually an honest text message or a phone call can alleviate all that problem. And ultimately, that is your pathway to start and be professional, looking after yourself, but showing a little bit of respect to your coach. And ultimately, the guys who you're going to train with, because it would have a damning effect on potentially the session and what your contribution to that session for the other guys is as well.
So I also think that's a key message when a coach meets a player, because it's not easy to send that message if you don't know how that's going to be taken. You know, you need to, like, I know that because I know you and we go way back, I'm working with you, I can call you the night before and you trust everything I'm saying. I'm telling you it for a reason, but that's one of the things you need early, because, you know, if you don't know each other, I don't know how you're going to take that. I don't know, you know, because I don't know you, and you know, you're a new coach. I don't know that you're not going to hold that against me. I don't know that you're necessarily going to take my word as gospel and believe me. So I think that's something really key. The trust thing that we've talked about, we keep coming back to in the relationship.
Back to the very first message, doesn't it? The trust and the relationship that you guys have to form with, if it's me as your coach or whoever your coach is now, it is the most fundamental thing that you will have to give you any chance at whatever club you're at or whatever level you're at.
So here's another flip. How many chances, this is a message now to coaches, how many chances do you give to someone before in your head, you're taking the piss now? What you're saying?
In terms of a lack of professionalism?
Lack of professionalism, lack of professionalism, stroke. Like I just said, that there maybe the night before I'm thinking, you know what, I can't bother tomorrow, David, my hamstring's not right. How many times, and then you realise the next day that it's just because they wanted a day off. How, you know, where does that live? Because it's all very well working in the right direction. How do you deal with someone that's going in the wrong direction? Do you get what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, the first part of that is obviously the first time this happens, that I have to have the relationship with you like you want to have with me. And if you tell me that that's the situation, then I would see no reason to start with to dispel or disprove that. So the only way this thing starts developing is when the actual physios tell me that you've come in on the next morning, tested, and they see very little wrong. On the first one, you know, you could be feeling tight. If it's one day and away we go. If it becomes, I mean, look, if it becomes a weekly thing, it's just finished before it starts. But if it becomes once every month, or you just have to see certain patterns develop within it.
Doesn't that come down to, I call it the gap? You've told me where you want to be, and this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And everything in the middle is the gap.
Yeah.
So it's how wide is the gap?
And when the gap
you want to be a top player,
yeah,
you're telling me you want to be a top player, but you're doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so for, you know, if you're saying, well, I'm tight and I just want a day off, but you've actually told me you want to be England's number one, then you either just say, coach, struggling today, or you say, coach, I really could do with a day off, and you're actually honest about it.
Yeah, I think the honest way always would win the race, especially if it's not really in your character or trait to be that way. And how many times, and this is where me being on for you guys tonight, from the coaching perspective, how many times have I fought for Joe? Hundreds of times, whether it be small little moments on a training pitch, small little moments in a staff meeting room, or full on with a manager. How many times I fought for him in our period working together? And it's the same for all the lads I've worked with. That is the job. You trust me to put you and get you in a position to be what you want to be and be in that team and playing at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. But how many, and it's not something that the players should know, But hopefully the relationship is there to know that when they're getting questioned by whether it's other members of staff for professionalism, the manager, the coaches, he's not good enough, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. Part of your job as his coach is to fight for that guy, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I want to bring this back to all these years back. And when did you first become aware of Joe?
I knew I was working at Northampton Town at the time. So Joe would have been at Shrewsbury Town, and certainly, I'm not sure when I first worked with him with England, he'd actually played against Northampton for Shrewsbury. I don't think that had been the case. I think that was the year after. But obviously, I was aware at Northampton Town of a young goalkeeper coming through the ranks and making his way at Shrewsbury, because it was obviously the clubs of a similar level. But because I'd got the opportunity, but from doing all the coaching badges, and through that pathway that allowed me to go and coach the young England teams. When I first came across Joe for that few days training, I were blown away. And I think the thing that really resonated with me is that obviously I would struggle in the modern game, and probably, some people would argue struggled when I actually made it, just because of the size comparison. But he had all my attributes, but obviously at 6'4", 6'5", and had a real drive and a passion and an energy and a crazy enthusiasm for life and football. And I think that's really what grasped me, because I thought, really, in some ways, you could be what I never was, because I see so much of me in there, but obviously you were a lot better or bigger. But yeah, and first impressions are always key, eh? And obviously I'm a young coach at that time, and I'm looking at Joe in this session. I mean, I wouldn't even know what we did. I've got no idea. But I just saw so much energy, passion, enthusiasm, and natural talent for being in goal. It was like, wow. And, it lasted with me for a long time. But you can't give people that. You can nurture a talent, you can nurture and build on a technique, but the passion and enthusiasm for what you're doing, you can't instill that in anybody. And a drive to want to come to work every day to be better and enjoy it, really enjoy it. And I try and talk to them about that mentality, that school playground. And when people have had bad times, bad injuries and anything like that, try and get your mind back to why we're here and what got you here. And I think working with yourself, Jamie, and as I said, other people in your field, I think get back to the fundamentals of why we all want to be in whatever place we're in, gives you that great thing in life that, you look at your feet, and that's where you are. If you don't want to be here, your feet will take you somewhere else.
And so you saw that in Joe when you were at, your early days of England, and the two of you then, your paths crossed again as you've then moved to Man City and then gone out on loan, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So Birmingham. So Dave, are you goalkeeping coach at Birmingham at this point? So your career has then gone boom, boom, like this?
Yeah. I had 3.5 years at Northampton Town as a full-time. I had a year at Huddersfield, my first full-time job. Mm-hmm. I lost my job through the club going into administration. It were having a real difficult time. Because I'd done some work previously with the England teams, I did a little bit of work for the FA. Eric Steele, who I'm sure at some point we'll speak about tonight, who was really my mentor in terms of goalkeeping coaching, allowed me to go to Aston Villa and do some coaching there and a bit of scouting for him. And eventually I got a job again at Northampton Town, spent 3.5 years there. I did 18 months at Nottingham Forest, and Birmingham City came calling, which were a massive step up for me as a coach, working from League One to go straight into Premier League football. Again, a young coach at that time, working with relatively senior goalkeepers. Joined in the January. The team ultimately failed in its bid to survive in the Premier League that season and got relegated. Mike Taylor was the goalie. Great guy, Mike. Still speak to him fairly regularly. Obviously, he's had a little dabble at coaching and whatever as well. And kind of that was my first real big decision-making process in football, if you like, with a big decision. And we stuck with Mike in the Championship. I thought his experience would get the team promoted. And eventually that's actually what happened. So the next season we finished second and got promoted back to the Premier League. And then it was pretty clear. And again, these are the big decisions you have to make as a coach, even though I'd got a professional and a relationship with Mike. I felt as though we needed something more if we were going to try and stay in the Premier League. And these are decisions as a coach you have to make. Nothing personal. It was my feel at the time, and the manager at the club obviously backed my decision. He left that decision-making process to me. And ultimately, the club didn't have masses of money to go and make a signing at that time. They needed to establish themselves in the Premier League again. And I knew that Joe, for whatever reason, were going to be available to take on loan. And as soon as it became clear that that was something that Man City were going to allow to happen, I didn't have any other target in my mind. And obviously I sold Joe to Alec McLeish and ultimately the Birmingham board and asked them to get, a deal across the line.
How important is the skill of communication and influence for a goalkeeping coach? Because you've just said, I've had to convince Alex McLeish and the board. And I know you've done that, like I said, with a young goalkeeper going after Harry Lewis, and you've done that with another young goalkeeper from Man City to Southampton, and Gunn. So you're a Yorkshire lad. You can talk to anyone. But how important is that?
I always think, and again, it comes actually back to the start of the conversation, when it's always easier signing a guy that you've worked with and you've seen some talent. And ultimately, at the point of trying to sign Joe for Birmingham, I didn't know at that time that our off-the-field relationship and our professional relationship would develop into eventually working for the national team together. But what I did know is that what I saw of him in the young England teams, but also performing for Shrewsbury, and obviously after that at Man City and all the things that transpired, I knew that he had everything that were required for Birmingham City to achieve their goal that next season, and that was to remain in the Premier League. And I knew that he had the qualities, even though he'd not had that much experience at that level, to do that. And yeah, it's a big call and it's a big sell. And ultimately, that's what I touched on earlier as well. And Joe would know from the start of that period at Birmingham, we had some tough moments. And I had some tough moments, making sure that Joe stayed in that team and we stuck with him when things get a little bit hairy. But again, I think that's part of the coach's job, that it's me fighting for them, and we're working and we're working and we're working. And ultimately, all the right things actually happen. but it's not by luck that these things happen. Joe had got an unbelievable talent, and it were a really good fit, I believe, for him as well, and actually gave him the platform to go on and have the career he's had. And he produced unbelievable things at Birmingham. But the first few months certainly weren't easy. The team had ups and downs, as you would always have. But I think eventually, when he found his feet at that level and had a trust in the people around him, the club, the manager, the players, and that certainly at that point we got fans in the stadium and they loved seeing that passion and drive from him. And I remember when he came back to play against us, that what he'd produced for Birmingham made sure that he had a fabulous reception when he came back and played against us, I think the following season and seasons after that. And again, that's through him having the maturity to build a relationship with the people at the club and the fans as well. But I thought that really gave him the platform to show, and he then knew, not that he ever doubted himself, but that was a real reminder and the saying, look, I'm ready now. Whatever Man City are saying to me, I'm ready. I've just produced here what can ultimately lead to me being a title-winning goalkeeper, an England goalkeeper. It's just sometimes you need some belief and reassurance, and that year at Birmingham, I think, gave him that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're bang on, David.
Hey.
But yeah, like you said, it's not necessarily a doubt, but it was a point, you know, obviously you remember it better than I do. People will had this opinion that and have this memory that I went to Birmingham as a kind of strategical move. I didn't go to Birmingham as a strategical move. I went to Birmingham because Man City didn't want me. And I went to Birmingham with every intention of putting my middle finger up to, not that, you know, obviously people need to be clever in how they listen to what I'm saying here, because I love the club, Manchester City. I love the people. I love them. The team is a team at the end of the day. And I was willing to put my finger up to that, the team and that board at the time, who said that I wasn't good enough. They said that Mark Hughes was in charge and his opinion was more important than my development as a goalkeeper. Fine. And I was going to go to Birmingham and I was going to rip it up. I was going to work with Dave, and then I was either going to sign for Birmingham or I was going to sign for someone else. That was the plan. There was no 1 year, get himself out, get some experience. I'd already played 50 Premier League games at this point. I'd already played in Europe. I was already in, pushing for England squads. So I wasn't going there for any other reason other than to go hard and to establish myself. And if they didn't want me, I was going to make myself available to someone else. It was only due to a change of mind. We had big discussions, David, didn't we? We had big discussions about signing permanently for Birmingham. That was in the January window. That was a discussion.
Yeah, but you again have to have that relationship with me and vice versa, because ultimately I have to, as a coach, I have to start making plans pre-Christmas as to what's happening, especially when you are only a lone goalkeeper. You're not even our asset at that point, you know. Yeah,
and there were discussions we need to have, and probably had the management not changed, at Manchester City, that would have probably happened. If not, I'd have gone. I'd have gone elsewhere. It's only because, in the grand scheme of things, Mark Hughes left. Mancini came in, and obviously he came in whenever he did. And at that moment, we were on fire at Birmingham. Like we were on fire, and he obviously looked at his board and said, "Why have you got a young goalkeeper here, a young English goalkeeper, and you're letting him go?" And he must have fought for me to come back to the team, because that was not the plan. That was not the route. They had Shea, they had a great goalkeeper. So, there was a different momentum. There's a different drive for me when I came to work with you. And it's just nuts how football works out. It is just bonkers how the game works out. And we can all gloss over a career, but if we really go back to those big moments, like you talked about, like you said, I could have easily come out of that team a month in. Could have easily, not because I was doing particularly badly, but Mike had a great season in the Championship. Mike was, you know, a really well-respected goalkeeper at the club, had done great things. And, you know, it would have been easy. It would have been easy for Alex McLeish to say, yeah, Joe, we love you as a talent, but right now we need some stability. We need Mike in. So I know you fought for me then. And you didn't even know, but that was because of what you believed and you saw. And I've constantly had that in my career coming up. I've had people see more in me than I possess. And that's not me doubting myself. I just don't see it. So I appreciate that. And I'd like to think I didn't pay you back, because we're not meant to pay each other. We worked together and we got the success together.
There is one moment that I will always remember of our time at Birmingham. And I think because of the loan deal, I think the problems came early on because Man City came to Birmingham early in the season.
Yeah.
And we drew 0-0. So
yeah, I remember.
Mike kept a clean sheet, which as a goal is a massive thing. And from keeping a clean sheet, he, to be fair to him, he expected to stay in the team.
Yeah.
But that was never the plan, whether we'd have won 5-0, got beat 5-0. You know, you were out of the team by default at that point, and he were in the team because of circumstance your loan deal didn't permit. So it was a real difficult one, because as a goalie, you would expect to stay in at 0-0. But anyway, but I remember, I don't know if it was the next game or whatever, but we went to Liverpool.
It was the next game.
Liverpool, and we drew 2-2, right? And actually deserved to win the game. They got a dodgy penalty that Stevie bobbed away late on. But I remember you taking a cross and just kissing the ball. I wish if somebody had ever got a picture of it. And I still think at that moment, that defined you at Birmingham. That one moment where we'd stopped punching, we were coming, dominating and catching. You'd caught this cross, you kissed the ball, and it always sticks in my mind, the moment. And for me, you never look back from that moment.
Well, we are one.
That's my memory.
It is the truth. It is. Cammy scored a banger from 30 yards. It was an Anfield night. And then we just went from there as a team.
From that point on, yeah.
Yeah.
But that one moment of being then put back in the team, the pressure of the older goal, getting a great result, but you dominating your area, taking crosses and kissing this fucking ball. I thought, that's it. He's got it. And boom, anything happened after that, you know.
So the next phase. So you send him on his way back to Man City. Yeah?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking we've had England's most talented keepers in the league. He's left, and I've got to replace that. And he left with all my blessing, because I'd got no doubt that by going back to Man City and the changes he's just alluded to, he were going to get a chance, and I had no doubt that he would go on and be successful.
What did it teach you as a coach? What did you learn? Because you've obviously you've been working with a future England #1. What did that do for your coaching? What did you learn about yourself?
It was probably the first time for me in my coaching career that I actually started to get a profile because of Joe's success.
Mm-hmm.
Until I joined Birmingham, all right, Joe knew me because I'd done some young England teams, but I don't think that anybody other than the guys who had done my coursework and Eric Steele, who was my mentor, there wouldn't have been many people have heard of who and what I was all about. So actually, Joe having a really successful year, probably were the first time that people actually asked, well, actually, who maybe is coaching the goalies at Birmingham? I think that would be fair to say that. So I'd been coaching at that time probably 8 or 9 years before anybody really knew that I existed in that way. But not that's not the reason I was doing it. I was doing it to try and get the guys to be successful and ultimately have careers. But it was the first time I personally got some recognition and actually the profile of Birmingham and the goalkeeping department suddenly became quite a hot topic. And especially when Joe left to go to Man City, we had to replace him with somebody who I thought could at least equal that and if not do better. And at this point, obviously the club had stayed in the league, so we now decided to sign a goalkeeper. And obviously I'd been during the season tracking various goalkeepers, but I'd kind of made my mind up that I wanted to try and sign Ben Foster from Man United. And I obviously had lots of scouting reports because I'd done them myself. I'd gone and met him probably maybe a month before the end of the season and had an initial chat. And then when it were all finalised, obviously that Joe were definitely going to go back to Man City, we made a move. And at the time, Birmingham paid, I think it was 6 million, which was a hell of a lot of money at that time, to sign Ben from Man United.
Can I just jump in there? What did in that time with Dave at Birmingham, what did that mean for you? What was it? What did you really pick up from Dave that was different from being at City and then going to Birmingham? What were you two talking about in terms of being at Birmingham, and what could we learn from that time?
I remember at that time, and I'll be quite brutal here. I knew that I needed to build a personal relationship with Joe. I'd not had that many dealings with psychologists and psychology, but I did know that I wanted to set him some targets, and obviously one of them was to keep Birmingham in the Premier League, and one of them was to prove to Man City what he could be. But I do remember talking that Joe's aspiration, he wanted to play for England and be part of England. And I think it might have been the summer you actually left. You went. Did you go to Trinidad? Is that the first cap? What was that after the season at Birmingham? Am I right there? Is that because I do remember at some point speaking about you trying to break into that England squad.
You know what I think. What was I 09-10 at Birmingham? I think I was.
I should have done some research. I'm getting too old.
Straight on Google.
Yeah, go on, have a look. I can't. I know we spoke about aspiration and target and making an England squad and ultimately trying to make your debut were part of what a successful season at Birmingham could lead to. I feel sure that you
I went. No, I'd already played for England. I went to the World Cup. I got picked for the World Cup.
Third choice.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So I knew there was something within it. Yeah.
At this point, then, your third choice for England. You two have just worked together. So what are you remembering, Joe?
I remember just being part of City was a real hectic time. From the moment I walked through the doors at City, it was, Stuart Pearce, and then it was Sven, then it was Mark Hughes. It was just nuts. The whole place was growing. No one was really keeping their jobs. There was no real stability, and it was kind of like new people walking in. I just remember working with Dave, and I just remember thinking, just feeling really even though it was a 1 year loan, like I've been on loan now, and I spoke to you about it. It was just awful. Being on loan is awful as an older player. It's almost impossible because, you've got different things going on in your life that just do not suit being alone. So obviously I'm going to Birmingham to whatever's gone on has gone on. Let's see what this is like. And then it was just solid. I just remember being part of something really solid, a foundation of someone who wanted me to just go in goal and be good at being in goal. And that was all that was being asked of me. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was going to be pushed. It was, I was working with someone that I could I walked in and Dave kind of had a kind of fear factor with the other goalies. And like, that's just not how I work. So I just abused him from the moment I walked through his door because I liked him. You know, I've said that to everyone that I've worked with. And, you know, if I step too far with the banter or abuse, say, listen, notice how I speak to you and notice how I speak to someone different, an example of someone that maybe they perceived that I didn't like, I'd just be nothing but polite. But if I've got a good relationship with someone, it just grows. The kind of the abuse and the banter grows. And I loved fighting. I loved pushing against Dave's kind of dour Yorkshireness, but I loved his push. I loved fight. I loved his intensity of training. You train to win. You train to get better. You train to save every ball. And if you didn't, you know, there was going to be an issue. And it wasn't an issue of being told off like a little boy. It was almost like, what are you doing? You know, as you said, Jay. So you claim you want to be this goalie, yeah? Well, you ain't going to be this goalie that way, mate. You're not. You can't just switch it on. You can't just switch it off. So I just love that kind of real stripped back groundwork mentality. And as Dave said, the Thursday, Friday building into the game. But whenever we could, we worked, didn't we, Dave? Whenever we could,
yep.
we worked. Those Monday, Tuesdays, some people, you know, the people who don't want it don't look forward to the Mondays and Tuesdays. The people who want it, the Dave Watson coaches of the world, the people like myself, they're the days that I love. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be out there arguing. I wanted to be out there. I wanted you to put a bad session on so I could hold you accountable for it. Like I loved all that kind of relationship that we had. And then I loved also the fact it would then taper into moving into the game. So there was two sides to what we were doing. We weren't just whacking our heads against the brick wall, train. It was train for a purpose. And I enjoyed sharing that and growing, if you like, as a goalkeeper who saw that the hard work still needed to be done and the hard work still was the best thing to get the best rewards.
I might need a box of tissues. It's getting quite emotional, isn't it?
It's the truth, baby. It's the truth.
It's a different, I'm calling this the relationship issue, because a lot of people wouldn't have heard or seen this, Dave.
No, for sure.
They see, it's like when Joe describes it as the steps, and what they've heard is stories of guys' journeys, but they've not heard the relationship with the coach and the goalkeeper.
No,
they've just heard the story, and this is why I think this is a special conversation, because you're hearing it from both sides, and I think it's the insights. You know, I keep saying to you guys, don't just watch or listen, study what is being said, really study it. You know, because for me, this is dynamite. This is dynamite. If you're a goalkeeping coach, what is it that's what Joe's saying about this relationship or about that time that you can extract? So I'm going to fast forward Joe's he's gone back to City. He's then, you know, City are doing their thing, climbing. You're now in your career, because there's two parallels here, aren't there?
Yeah.
Two parallels. So Dave, you're still at Birmingham at this point.
Yep.
And Joe makes the England team. Yeah. Not makes the England team. You're in the squad, but now you're then promoted to number two, right?
Yep.
And there's changes in the England management. So Dave, let's go to your career. You get a phone call. What happens?
And this is the industry that we work in, and the most unique situation you'll ever find. Joe had left, gone back to City. We'd had a year with Ben Foster, who had a fantastic season, but the team got relegated. Birmingham changed ownership, lost all its players. Chris Hughton came into Birmingham. probably, if truth be told, didn't want me to be his goalie coach, but ultimately circumstances led to me staying. And we had ultimately a really successful but strange year. We'd won the Carling Cup the year before, got relegated. So I were working back in the Championship with Chris. We made it to the playoffs, got beat in the playoffs, and had played in the Europa League as well. So I think we'd played probably 65 games or something. We'd got beat on the semi-final of the playoffs by Blackpool, and the season was done. I'd just come back from work. It was the day after the match. It were all finished. I just pulled on my drive. Emma and I had just had our son Ethan. He was probably 2 or 3 months old. And before I got out of the car, Ray Clements phoned me and asked me if I were free to go and join up with England for the summer games and see where that took us, really. So he didn't really say more than that. And then I went to the PFA or play end of the year dinners and sat down, had a chat with Roy Hodgson in a little bit more depth about it, because after Ray's call, Roy then phoned me. And said, come and join us. I think we got a friendly in Norway and a friendly against Belgium, and then we were going to the Euros. And seriously, when I put the phone down to Ray initially, I couldn't believe it. I think that for all the difficulties of that season for me, and a lot of real difficult times in Emma, my wife, and I's personal life at that time. She had a real difficult pregnancy and spent 4 months in hospital. I was training. I was taking a lunch to the hospital in Birmingham, coming back to do the afternoon sessions and all the games, and real difficult period in our lives, really. To get that phone call, totally out of the blue, is just really a reflection of hopefully the work I'd done, but obviously the relationship I'd built with Joe, because he'd had an influence in playing a part in that scenario. I know that there were other people involved who could have got the job, but thankfully Joe's persuasion with Ray and ultimately Roy led to Roy making the decision he made. And it's something that obviously words couldn't describe at that time. I think a lot of emotion for me through all the strife I'd had in that season. I just couldn't believe it. My aspiration, having finished playing football, was to try and be a Premier League coach. That's what I dreamt of being. And that season being in the Championship, there was no way on earth I felt that I were anywhere near capable of, representing obviously my country, our country, and taking a group of goalkeepers into a tournament. I felt as though you had to be working at the top table. I thought you had to be, in and amongst the real elite. So it just shows that, somewhere along the line, your qualities shine through. So if you're a coach at the minute working in League Two for Newport County, or one of the new teams that's just come up, Harrogate Town, or whatever you are, the doors are always open if people see and recognise the human qualities, but ultimately your coaching ability too. I had no hesitation in obviously accepting the offer, and ultimately, within a few weeks, kind of taking the job on the basis I took it. But probably the most shocked I've ever been in my life, to be honest. I think there's certain points in your life where you believe you're capable, you believe you're doing a good job, you're circling and swimming with the elite, if you like. I didn't feel at that point as though that was where I was at in my coaching career. So a massive shock, to be honest.
What do you remember, Joe?
I remember it was Fabio Capello was obviously the England manager. From the 2010 World Cup, he totally changed how he felt about the job. I think he felt, obviously the media went hard. The media went hard at him. I didn't feel it was justified. So he he totally changed his attitude as England manager. And, I think a few things went on. I think there were a few things going on with his captaincy and how he was taking things. And then next thing you know, literally building up into a tournament, which we've been pushing towards. It was our title winning season as well. So a tournament I was really looking forward to. He went, and then Roy took over. Things moved quickly in football. And then, fair play. It was a real honour, the phone call I received from Roy, because he said, I've taken this job on quick. You're my number one goalie. I can't see anything else going on at the moment. And I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel good. And I've got to appoint a goalkeeping coach. Does anyone spring to mind? That was literally put on my toes. The first name I said was, I've worked closely with Dave Watson. You might have heard of him. He's worked at Birmingham. Someone that I've loved working with, and someone that I know would exactly how he just described then, how he'd feel if this was his job. He'd definitely feel like he was, going to battle for his country. So I gave my opinion. We had a good conversation. Roy didn't give me any assurances or any promises. He said he'd look into it, but he also respected my view. And then I remember telling and seeing how we go from there. And then obviously it was great news when he phoned me to say that was the decision that he was making. I knew that. I actually thought we were going to go. I just thought it was written in the stars. We're going to go to the Euros and win it.
It is an amazing feeling, because I felt exactly the same way. I just thought all the hurt that England had had and all the games I'd watched and seen, and memories from doing it with my dad, and wishing that he could see these situations for me. Yeah, incredible. And yeah, I felt the same. It's amazing that you really believe at some point that you're going to do it. And yeah, I'm sure we'll allude to things further down the line with England, but for some reason I felt the stars were aligned for that tournament. I don't know. It really unbelievable feeling, and
it does that to you, mate. It absolutely does that to you. And then,
sure. But hey, look, that's because it matters, and we care, and ultimately,
hey, it was a good tournament. We had, we were a penalty shootout away from really progressing. So
yeah, for sure.
It was what it was.
So, I know we could talk all night here, and it seems like we are doing, but for the purpose of we have to progress this to then the next phase, the next chapter, which was what Joe's had 2 really quality seasons. Yeah. Golden Gloves, Premiership title, and then Watto, you start to see challenges, cracks, Joe not being himself.
Yeah.
Joe, what's next? I'll leave it with either of you two.
So I'm obviously at a point where I could walk on water as a keeper, and I genuinely thought it was incredibly easy to be a top keeper, to literally thinking this is really hard. Nothing's changed. I'm exactly the same person, but I was just getting really frustrated. I was starting to chase the ball, starting to try and get through games, just get through them without doing anything wrong. Whereas before, I just, we discussed, played with the freedom of literally going out there and just having a great time, and obviously being quite good as well, which helped. To which I'm not. I'd like to think even then, I'm incredibly open now. I wasn't as open then, but I was still like coming away on England camps, and we talked in depth, didn't we, David? It was like, I was like, what am I doing? I don't know what to do.
No, but if you think about the personal relationship you have as well as a professional relationship, it's so hard to see somebody who's been so successful and probably, as you actually said, never really thought too much about the fundamentals of it. You were just a naturally talented guy who actually really, really, really enjoyed playing football. Yep. And had never probably had the feelings that I had sometimes as a goalie, where if the ball crossed the halfway line coming towards my goal, I was thinking, like, not today. You'd never had that fear.
No
I suffered it and didn't have a support network around me because I'd been having bad moments and people getting on your back. And it's not nice, because actually when you actually start thinking about your game instead of being natural and thinking about, I might not be as good this side as that side, what about this start position? And it's not natural, and the brain then takes over all, and the negativity starts flowing. You look like you've never put the gloves on before. And for me, as your coach, and then it's hard for me to see that as well, and especially at that time, because I didn't have too many answers, if truth be told. Yeah. You're working away at Man City. I remember one England camp, you and I went out onto the Grove pitch, whether it was the morning of a game when you weren't playing or the day after a game you'd not played in, and it was just you and I. And I remember the session. I remember trying to cut it back because it's obviously just me serving and you in the goal, nobody else there, just the trees around that Grove pitch, and just trying to put a session on where it's just the fundamentals of the job again, and actually enjoy keeping the ball out of the net and trying to be successful again, and trying to get the joy back into it without thinking. That were as much as I could offer. But it's now around about this time, Jamie, that you obviously come into the fray, because I didn't have enough quality to deal with this situation, because it was going beyond my skill set.
Well, I'd started the season not great. Look, don't get me wrong, if you didn't know me or didn't know anything about me, you certainly wouldn't be like, this guy's crap. But I just wasn't at the consistent level that I'd set, and we all knew that I could achieve. So in the position that you are in as England goalkeeper, like it or love it, I don't really buy into the fact of, you're harshly treated and harshly judged. You know what you're signing up for. You don't have to play. You really don't. You have an option to go and be that guy. So if you're going to be that guy, you kind of have to expect what's coming. It's not nice to hear, but you also need to be able to be like, okay, well, it's not that important. It's Dave's opinion. It's Roy's opinion. It's, at the time, Manuel Pellegrini's opinion. Try and keep that calm, but Jesus, that's hard. So I was hanging on to both places because of what I'd done in the game. In my opinion, I kept my England place because everyone knew that I was a top keeper. I wasn't at that time, but I had people that believed in me. I had Roy that believed in me. I had Dave that believed in me, and I also had my City place because of what I'd done at the club. Manuel didn't necessarily believe in me then, because he'd come in to see this guy that he probably presumed was going to be a bit better than the guy that he had in goal for him. But he wasn't. I wasn't that bad. I just wasn't that guy. So I still, to that moment, it was the November one, and it was not long after that I did come out of the team. But it was lucky, because that never really affected my England status, because by the time we'd worked together and got my head around it, I was back in and flowing again at City. But that exact moment that you're talking about there, Dave, was just, I'd come to you and we were just literally like, oh, and you were like, just go and goal and save it. Like, you can, like, it's not that hard. And I was like, I'm trying.
Go and goal and save it.
I am trying, but...
I remember the session and the environment very well, because it's very rare that you would be able to go on an England camp. We didn't have probably wrongly, but we just wanted it to be us. We didn't have a physio, we didn't have a doctor, we didn't. We were just two. It were like two
Bag
guys
of balls
rocking
over
up.
the shoulder.
They were like two guys rocking up in the middle of a local park as such, just putting a session on and trying to get that love back for football. But I think, Joe, for me, when you talk about your level at that time, I think you produced at such a level that you were getting away with it. But people who were in the game, i.e. the England manager, coaches at the Premier League and goalie coaches, knew that there were 10% missing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not denying that.
That 10% for most, because they didn't have that extra 10% that you'd lost, you just became a regular in the field. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for us who'd worked with you and seen that 10% normally there, it actually felt like a big drop off.
Yeah, agreed. And then we did our best to get grip of it, Jay, didn't we? Then you came into the fray.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember some of those early conversations. It was like, I don't know whether to come for it, to not come for it. You know, do I do this? Do I do that? And I'm thinking, this guy's supposed to be like England #1 and Man City goalkeeper, and he's questioning, do I come for it? Do I not come for it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well, they were all the like Dave said, they were all the things that just my brain told me to do, and I did. You know, it wasn't even I didn't even know there was a process to it. I thought you just went out, and if you saw it and it was yours, you went and got it, and if it wasn't yours, you stayed in the goal and tried to save it.
If I'd have found it that easy, I might have done a lot better, you know. It used to take me 6 games in pre-season just to try and get a good start position to be able to do anything relatively normally, you know what I mean?
But I think, Dave, at some point you know, and this is when you're dealing with an elite athlete and somebody who makes it look easy, is that you're almost about the technical side. You just go and do it, and you get yourself out of your own way, or you really do understand the technical side and you can perform. But I think the key thing is it's back to that feeling of, and it's something I talk a lot with, or players resonate with, is it's you're back on the park. Because when you were back on the park with your mates, there was that feeling of, you know, you weren't even good technically. It was just, you just knew how to play and get out of your own way. And I think that's whenever I've found the ingredients to when Joe's been at his best, or, you know, somebody else has been at their best, they do get back to that essence of, I was just playing and I'm going after it. And if I miss it, I miss it. But you just know, and there's that feeling of knowing. And that's what we needed to get Joe back to, was back to those basics of just playing, not questioning. And then I remember at the time, because it you know, for those people who don't know, it was, let's call it November. I think, Joe, our first session was like December. It was early December of 2013. So It was actually it was a big year for you. It was like a World Cup year. And so I think the first England camp was, let's say, after January, wasn't it?
March. It was March.
Yeah, for sure.
March. Okay. So that was, I think, Dave, I think you and I spoke on the phone first of all. I think we spoke on the phone, and then I came down to, I think it was the Grove we first met. So what were you, what were you and Joe thinking in terms of the mental side? What, because you were instrumental in that as well.
I think for me, I just saw a different guy, and that told me that I didn't have the skill set to deal with what were required, because I'd always seen Joe, whether you were playing a game and whatever the enormity of that game, he was still the Joe I'd always met. And the guy on the training ground was the guy I'd met when he was 16 at Shrewsbury, and he were in that first England camp. And the first time that I saw him fighting to be that guy, then I knew he needed some help. Because just like playing, he never had to think. His personality, he never had to think, but he was having to try and be what he used to be in a strange way.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that surrounded him just wasn't that natural guy that we'd all experienced throughout his whole lives. And, you know, I've said before, whether I'm the greatest or not the greatest coach is irrelevant. I'm a human being, and I knew that this guy was struggling, and our personal relationship told me that he was struggling. But I also knew at that time, because I'd developed, that I didn't have all the answers, if any, at this situation. It needed more than me. And it just shows you that teamwork, both on and off the field, is important, because we had to become a team off the field to get him prepared to be on the field. You were doing that for him at Man City, but I also wanted you to do that for us, for him, and for the national team, and for that to be successful. And the one thing, again, about being a great coach is pulling all the assets you can have together to come to the same team and build around it. And you became a massive part of, obviously, Joe's team, to be perfectly honest. And we're doing this thing tonight, and it shows you how your relationships blossomed. But from that point to where we are today, he's become able to deal with all the adversity in his life in a totally different way than what he would have done without your support, because it was difficult at that time. There's no denying it. And he wanted to be successful. I wanted him to be successful. Everybody that were in and around him, his close friends, family, but we don't always have the answers.
What did you notice? Because you have seen that when he came back to England, I remember our conversations, and I think a lot of people, I always say to him, look, it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix. You know, as you can see, testament that, you know, we still have a relationship now, which has you know, morphed in different ways. But what I remember you saying to me, I've told him he's got to stick with it. It's not just short term. I remember you saying, and you seeing a change in him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But
what kind of changes did you see in him?
I think at the point that the biggest change I saw is the fact that we'd always had a real positive relationship, but it were actually the first time that I felt we actually, through adversity, sometimes this does happen, you actually get closer. And, you know, his reliance on you particularly, but also on me at that point, and the trust to get through these situations and have open and frank discussions, because you can't get past these barriers unless you cut the chase and say, look, this is where I'm actually at, this is what I'm feeling, these are my situations. And without that honesty, we couldn't have moved forward, to be perfectly frank with you. And there's a lot of things that can't always be said, but you have to say them, and then we can start and move forward again. And the relationship has not lost any of that foundation. Right now, we start building blocks again.
So it, you know, for those listening, watching, whatever format you get in this, I remember you saying, he's talking to me more.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember Joe saying, "Oh, Joe, you can tell the story of Xavi." because
Yep.
this was part of it. It was, you called me, Dave, we spoke, and you said, he's talking to me, which meant he wasn't talking to you really, honestly. And then you've got Xavi, goalkeeping coach at Man City. Joe, that's where you pick up on.
Yeah, well, I think I needed what I had with, obviously I needed what I had with you, Dave, when I was struggling. And I almost held it against Xavi, and we clashed at the start, and that's not his fault.
Spanish, English.
Well, every excuse under the sun I gave you, didn't I, Jay, for why it wasn't working. And then you just stopped me in my tracks. I wasn't blaming him. Let's just be clear. But like I was frustrated. The club changing goalie coaches. Blah, blah, how am I supposed to have any sort of stability? No wonder. And then you just said, well, do you know anything about this guy? You got to know him. Well, no, it's whatever. I'll speak to Dave. I'll speak to you. And you're like, no, it don't work like that. This is your daily. See how that goes. See how that works. Just having a conversation, and from then on in, I kind of sat back, took advice, and realised that I needed to build a relationship with my current goalkeeper coach, who was Xavi at the time, and again someone that I'm close with now, because I don't know, Dave, you can probably comment on this as a coach. The last thing you need is a goalkeeper that you're trying to help or make better with their backup who's not willing to listen to you because they feel like they know better, stroke they've got other people that they feel are advising them better. That was something that we needed to talk about, as obviously as Jamie as a mental coach and you as a national coach stroke friend. I think that was an important thing to address, and that helped a lot in the situation as well. Having my home life was good, my Man City life was good, my relationship, I was beginning to understand my goalkeeper coach, and I think the kind of narrow, like, because of my success in how I progressed, I didn't really feel like I needed anyone else, and that was probably one of the reasons why I didn't keep growing, because I'd always taken people in, and now I thought I'd reached my limit, and I didn't need anyone else, and was kind of setting what I needed. That this has literally just popped into my head now, and it's probably one of the reasons why I did stutter, because I wasn't as open and willing to learn and develop with people. I felt like I'd done everything with the people around me that I needed, and everyone else is just a manager or a coach now. I've got what I need, but no, it doesn't. Football doesn't stop moving. The world doesn't stop moving, and you've got to be open to develop and work with people, and you can't just rely on what you've already got. It's what's in front of you.
I think and I remember the conversation as well, and for me, it was it was very interesting for me when I first met you, Joe, and I remember thinking, God, I'm about to help a Man City player. My uncle's going to kill me. And I remember hearing you talk about Dave and England and the contrast to how you were talking about Xavi at that time.
Yeah.
It was like night and day. And it was like your face lit up when you talked about Dave and you talked about England, and it was like about Xavi, and it was like, well, go and find out who he is, because it's not. I remember saying to you, it's not his responsibility to develop the relationship with you. It's your responsibility to develop the relationship with him. That's if you wanted to be in man mode.
Yeah.
If you were in boy mode, you're like, well, no, you've got to come and talk to me.
Which I'm pretty sure I was in. I was.
Not pretty sure.
I didn't know what the modes were. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what anything was, but that's exactly where I was at.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't give myself an arrogant title, but I was being fucking arrogant then.
Yeah, and Dave, I think what was great for everybody then, I think it really was what you just said. Like, it was the team, it was working together, it was everybody was communicating. I remember when I first went to meet Xavi.
Yeah.
You know, that was defining moments for me. That was because I was like, this guy really, because normally I'm on the outside. I don't get it. You know, for me, historically, it was, I don't get to meet the other coach or, you know, that side. You know, I'm not involved with the club. I'm always outside of the club. And Joe was just adamant. He's like, no, I want you to come and meet Xavi. I want you to come and meet the club doctor. And I'm like, I remember saying, are you really sure? And you're like, yeah. And then it was like, I want you to come and meet Watto. And that was when I was like, he really wants to build this team around him. And, you know.
Well, I wanted it because I didn't want people, because still people don't understand, and I get it, what someone like you's role is with a player, and I didn't want them to think that I'd obviously made it clear. I didn't want them to think that I was going away and talking about them. You know, I didn't want it to be a secret. I didn't want anything to be a secret. I wanted it to be clear that whether it's good, bad, or indifferent news, I wanted us all be on the same page, and I wanted everyone to see that I was trying to grow up and trying to take control of something that could potentially have been a bad situation and make it better. Mm-hmm. And however which way that went, I wanted everyone to see that it wasn't through lack of trying. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, what I had and what was being the opportunities that I was getting. I wanted people to know that I really cared about them, and I loved them, and the form that I'm in isn't through anything else other than just a bit of my mind wasn't right. And me saying my mind is not right is not saying that my head was elsewhere. It was just working against each other and I wasn't performing. I was trying to do the right thing. So I wanted everyone to see that and ultimately work together to try and help me, because I needed help. That's why.
Actually, it says your mindset's in a good place because of the work you've been doing, that now you can embrace all these people and know that rather than infighting and people against each other or whatever, they all have to be together, because ultimately they're all trying to look after you.
Yeah. And even if it didn't work out, like even if there was a worst case that it all went downhill, I still wanted it to be clear what was going on, and it could be managed in the best way possible.
And I think that's also an important point, because you know that was where Joe, you saying to Xavi and the club doc, which in you know, I remember club doc saying we nearly lost the man before we lost the player.
Yeah.
And I remember we remember Dave when we and that was big. I think that's a big statement, and I always recall I retell that story to coaches, because coaches often delay in encouraging the player, and it gets to the point where you're only looking at it when things are going wrong. Well, when you get them, you see them at that level, do not wait for them to have that drop before you start having that conversation about what's the next level, because invariably they've been through it, like you as a player, Dave, or they've seen it hundreds of times with other players. So why would you wait for the drop before you start encouraging them to look at this side and to encourage them to talk to people. So it's not looking at to fix things. Don't wait. You know, the young man is 17 or 19 or 24. If he's talented, put it in place. It's you don't get car insurance after you've crashed. And this is what people have got to learn from your experience, Watto, your experience, Joe.
It's the one thing I would say now, always in these situations, really be proactive than reactive, because it's too late. It's not too late, but you've missed a massive opportunity already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by hopefully the audience who watch this, you know, they'll see all these different elements, and actually it'll relate in some way to wherever they're at in life as well.
That's why we're doing it, Jay. That couldn't be any more reason why we're doing it. Because believe it or not, whatever we've just discussed there will resonate with someone doing something totally different to what we're talking about. If they were to listen and really listen to the reasons why, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about football or England.
No, it's life, isn't it?
Or whether we're talking about an office job or someone coming up at university. It's just like nearly every human being, especially ones that want to be successful, go through a madness. So it's about seeing it as early as you can, having access, using the access you've got. I've always said this: not everyone is as lucky as I am to have, a top end coach as a friend, a mental coach who, it's not affordable, but there's ways, there's means for everyone out there to get in front of it. Even if this is a free podcast, whether it's free on YouTube, it's people's experiences. You can get it from anywhere and everywhere to put you in a good place, in a good solid place for when good or bad things happen to you.
It's so Dave, as we're heading into the last 5 minutes of the World Cup final, right? For the goalkeeping coaches out there, you've recruited and worked with some top players, yeah. How do you work with them? What advice do you give in terms of working with a manager? Because I've seen you make decisions about goalkeepers. I've seen you buy young goalkeepers. I mean, past couple of years at Southampton, you've had some big decisions to make, haven't you?
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Listen, I don't say this lightly. I don't say this lightly. Gunn, McCarthy, Fraser. And then you've got to speak to the manager.
Look, the reality is, as you get older, and I've been at Southampton, this is my 7th year now. I think I'm on the 5th manager. So apart from the first couple of years that were really stable, when actually the club were most successful, you're changing and evolving, but that's allowed me to some real difficult moments, fighting for goalies with various managers that we've had over the piece, especially after Ronald left, and really probably going above and beyond maybe what I should have done, if truth be told. But I'm passionate about the job I was doing at that time, which were coaching the goalies. I was passionate about looking after them. I was passionate about defending them. And I would fight if I believed what somebody were telling me. I didn't believe it, to be perfectly honest. And I had a lot of them tough moments. And there's a couple of times where I've got in the car and driven all the way up to Birmingham because that's what I felt I had to do, just to get some release from that situation, because I thought I'd fought as much as I could fight. And ultimately, the final decision is out of my hands now. But on most occasions, my fighting proved to be enough.
So, Dave, honestly, loved every minute of it. Great to catch up again. And again, it's always that personal connection and those real stories. And it was an important time in I love the parallels because it was an important time in your career and an important time in Joe's career, and also, you know, I'll say in mine as well, because, you know, we were, I think from my perspective, I'd spent many years, and I remember at one point sitting down with myself and going, you know, do you know what? This is, you know, I've worked hard to be in the position to be able to help this guy at this moment in time. So it was like the three of us kind of came to a point in our careers. But what would you say to 17-year-old Dave, who's playing football? What would you say to him today? And what would you say to the young coach?
A 17-year-old Dave, I would honestly say, live for the moment and never forget that moment, because you can think far too far in advance, think you've got so many sessions, so many years, so many games. Don't think too far. Enjoy that day, whether it's your training session, whether it's your game, whether it's a weight session, whether it's a recovery session, whether it's a debrief. Enjoy being in that football environment, playing the sport you love with your mates, and enjoy and embrace every moment of it, and don't think too much about the future. The young coach, I think, don't beat yourself up too much at the start about what work you're actually doing and what you're not doing. I think really try and build a relationship with the whole group of goalkeepers you're working with. And the more that develops, I guarantee that they'll open up to you. Your sessions will develop just because they'll even throw things your way. It'll become a two-way street. And actually, the young coach, even the old coach as I am now, you live your life through watching them guys train well and perform well. And when they make that match-winning save and keep that clean sheet, it's like you're living it. And if you can keep that passion and drive and desire to mean something when they make their life-changing moments as they develop, then you'll always go far and do well. And you'll have your struggles, you'll have your difficult moments, but believe in your philosophy and what you're doing. And if you're not going to be sidetracked and derailed by that, and you've got the drive and determination to you know, commute, watch games, coach, double sessions, the kids, anything you have to do to get better and better and better, eventually, you know, the world is your oyster. And don't stop believing in what you do, but also just go for it.
True that, Davey.
I knew that was coming.
True that.
That was my life as a young man. Every hour devoted to it.
Well, that was pretty in depth. Personally, I really enjoyed going back to the moments that we talked about, the pushing on, the Birmingham days, the early City days, early England days with Dave, and then also the moments, the hard moments when, you know, really I personally had to grow up as a professional, and obviously we did that as a trio, and I really appreciate those times. But yeah, as the message of Gloved, I thought it was brilliant. Really exciting to hear the views of a coach, you know, a top coach, an ex-player, someone who's had their career taken from them. But the reason I wanted you to hear Dave's story and Dave's personality is because of his drive, is because of his never say die attitude. And there's always a solution out there. There's always a solution. So I want to thank you, David, for your time. Really, really appreciate you giving us that time and that energy and that honest opinion on everything that's gone on. And there's lots more to come. So thank you. I hope that's been as helpful to you guys as it has been to me.
I would like to end this by just saying the time has flown by. I've relived some unbelievable memories. And I think for you guys watching this tonight to see the insight and learn from two guys who really have shared a bond through some of the most difficult times in a career, professionally and privately, and to come through the other side like they have, and to open this up for everybody really is something that you must grasp. And I hope that when you do get the chance to watch it, you'll enjoy it as much as I have over the last couple of hours.
Top man, David.
Cheers. Oh, fantastic. We'll definitely do the live version. Yeah.
I shall look forward to it. It's been great seeing you guys. I've really enjoyed it. It's put things in perspective again. So I appreciate you giving me the chance to do it.
Love that, David.
See you guys.
All right.
The fire. Love,
Take
mate.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.